Hi, everyone. Are we ready to start? All right. Okay, welcome to the webinar on sworn translation. My name's Linda. What can I tell you about myself? I became a sworn translator shortly after the Voortrekkers reached the Old Transvaal. It feels like it anyway. And that was in the 90s. So at the time, I was just examined by another sworn translator of 7 years standing, something that you can still do to become a sworn translator, and then sworn in at the High Court. And I don't know whether Johan Blau is listening, but he still helped me to think up wording for my stamp, because there was nothing existing at the time. There was no formal way of doing it, really. There was just the legislation that said you had to be examined and you had to be sworn in, with a few requirements. So today we'll be talking, among other things, about what has changed in the meantime since the early days of becoming a sworn translator. We have today with us to talk on the subject Beverley Boland. She's been a freelance sworn translator for a while now, and she was involved quite extensively in updating the previous sworn translation manual, which only came out in 2004 when Marion Booth, still the previous chairperson, still wrote it. And then we also welcome Hester Wiseman, also a freelance sworn translator, and she worked with Beverley on changing the manual, so she's also very much up to date on it. And Laurent, Chauvet, a sworn translator in the English-French combination. So welcome to all the panelists, and thank you very much for agreeing to tell us more about what it's all about. Now, before I go on, just a request to ask that you please only start asking questions once all the panelists have finished speaking. Otherwise, you might ask something that they're still about to speak about. And no oral questions, please. Only put your questions in the Q&A area, not the chat area. Just type in the Q&A area, please. And if you join through Facebook, then you can just ask your questions in the comment section. Okay. Right, as for topics of discussion, I'd like to just kick off by discussing what documents would typically require sworn translation. That's a question that many people ask. And in my experience, mostly my client will be required by some sort of authority to submit a sworn translation of things like certificates, usually for immigration purposes, and then all documents submitted during court proceedings, for instance, and documents involved in the administration of an estate and so on, and other areas requiring a legally accepted document. So most of the time, my clients would actually ask me to do a sworn translation for them because they've been asked in turn. It's only been really that very few occasions that I was asked to do a translation and I had to advise the client, no, but this looks like a certificate. So do you want me to make it a sworn translation because there's an extra cost involved? And then, so usually a certificate would need to be sworn. So, if you ever get a client that asks you to translate something and it looks legal to you or like a certificate or so, just make sure from them whether it needs to be sworn or not. Right, and then I just want to quickly touch on the difference between general and sworn translation. A sworn translation, first of all, must be factually 100% accurate, rather than being an idiomatic rendering of the source text, like for information purposes. And for instance, if there's an error in your source text, you must reflect that error in the translation. You're not allowed to change it and correct it. And then also everything that's in the source text must appear in the target with no omissions, no additions, exactly like it is per page. Each page must be reflected almost like a mirror image of the source text. And then, of course, you need to be a sworn translator to do a sworn translation. The client will usually require a hard copy of the stamped document with your declaration of the translation being a true reflection of the source that sets out your credentials and so forth. But these days, sometimes they will accept a scanned copy of the stamped document. And I believe that one can even do electronic stamping and signing and so on, but that is not something that I've worked with. Maybe someone would like to touch on that later on. Okay, so first of all, Bev will be discussing, among other things, how to become a sworn translator. And Hester, what has changed during the recent updating of the first manual on sworn translation. Then Laurent will tell us a bit more about the practicalities of being a sworn translator, particularly in a foreign language. So Bev, if we can start with you, would you please tell us more about SARTI's accreditation exam for sworn translators, what the process involves, what language combinations are covered, and any training that's maybe available and so on. And perhaps I could ask you to give us an idea of how people charge for sworn translation as well. Bev?
Thanks, Linda, and hello, everyone. Just to start off by clarifying some terminology, in South Africa, an accredited translator is someone who has passed SARTI's accreditation exam and can be considered a proficient translator. And a sworn translator is someone who's been admitted in the South African High Court and is allowed to issue translations for court or legal purposes. So it is possible to be either sworn or accredited. If you go through the SARTI accreditation process of becoming a sworn translator, you will then end up being both sworn and accredited. So you get the best of both worlds that way. A few weeks ago, SARTI hosted a webinar. It's available on the SARTI website, and it's called The Ins and Outs of SARTI Accreditation. And that's a very useful one to watch in conjunction with this one. It covers all the benefits of accreditation, and a lot of the things are similar. If you're becoming a sworn translator through accreditation, the prerequisites are the same as were discussed in that webinar. And we might not have time to cover everything around the process today. So sworn translation is one of 4 possible types of accreditation, and they all have the same status. So if you watch the other webinar, you might realize that general translation will suit your purposes, and you don't actually need to be to become sworn and accredited, because you don't have to be a sworn translator to work as a translator in South Africa. So I would really recommend anyone who's interested in becoming accredited to go and look at that webinar as well. So I'm going to talk about the accreditation exam, because what wasn't covered in that webinar is how the sworn translation exam differs from that. So the first thing is that you have to own a copy of the SARTI Sworn Translation Manual, which is a document that Hester will speak about. It is only available for sale to SARTI members in digital format, and it costs 126 Rand. It will be your guidebook for preparing for the test and the exam, and you're also going to use it when you start working as a sworn translator. It really is an indispensable tool for that. The second difference is that for sworn translation, the practice test is compulsory. And the reason they do this is because sworn translation requires certain conventions. For example, you have to certify each page of your translation, you have to number the pages, there's certain ways that you deal with stamps and signatures in the original. All of that is explained in detail in the manual, how to do those things. But the practice test gives you the opportunity to make sure that you understand how to apply them in your translation before you apply for the exam. So as I mentioned, there are some prerequisites for applying for accreditation. One is that you have to have been a SARTI member for at least 3 months. And then you have to have a tertiary language or a language-related qualification or a specific number of years of relevant translation experience. Obviously, you won't have sworn translation experience, so general translation is accepted for those purposes. There's more information about that on the SARTI website and in that webinar. Once your application is approved, you then receive the practice test by email. Now, your preparation for the test really is your years of experience as a translator and studying the Sworn Translation Manual. You can use any of the resources that you normally use when you're working, other than speaking to another person. The manual lists the type of documents that sworn translators usually use. So it's a good idea to go through that and see if and consider whether you know what those documents look like in both your source and your target languages. The certificates often have standard wording, and a lot of that is available on the internet. So it's a good step to start in preparing for the test. You don't need to have a special stamp made for the test. You can insert a text box into your document on each page, and the manual explains what the wording should look like. The test costs 480 Rand, and it consists of one text that was taken from a previous exam. The text is marked by one person. You receive your marked script back with showing all your errors and comments and tips from the marker on what to consider when writing the exam. If you pass the test, you can write the exam. You can apply to write the exam immediately. If you fail the test, there are some waiting periods which will be explained to you with your results. And then once you've been approved to write the exam, you receive it via email. It's a password protected document. So Erika is the accreditations officer who will liaise with you around the exam. She will give you, at an agreed time, she gives you the password to unlock the exam, and you have 24 hours in which to complete it and return it. The exam costs 1,160 Rand. So the number of texts in the exam varies depending on the language combination, but you have to translate all the texts. You cannot choose as you can in the general translation exam. The texts are not particularly long or difficult. This is not meant to trick you. It's just to test your competence. So there's no tricks in the exam. Then if you pass, you'll receive an accreditation certificate from SARTI, and that accreditation remains valid for as long as you're a member of SARTI. And then you'll also receive the other documentation you need to appear in the High Court to be admitted, which is an extra process, which I think Hester will explain a little later. So once you pass the SARTI exam, you're then accredited, but you still have to go to court to become the sworn translator, and you receive your sworn translation certificate from the High Court. And then just quickly, some points to consider when you're preparing to write the test and the exam. As Linda has already said, it's not the kind of translation where you improve on the original. You have to just write exactly what you see. There's no additions, nothing can be omitted, and you must pay very close attention to detail. You will be penalized if you mistype names and numbers, and those are the kinds of things that are quite easy to overlook when you're concentrating, when you're stressed, if you're writing an exam. So you must really proofread your work very carefully afterwards, because there can be no mistakes in sworn translation. It's very onerous. And then terminology is also important. Excuse me. You must use the correct legal terms in your target language and be consistent when using those terms. So it's very important to own specialist legal dictionaries, both monolingual and bilingual, so that you're not only using general dictionaries for legal translations. And then the last thing is being able to format in Word. Also, as Linda said, your translation has to look almost exactly like the original document. So if you receive a one-page certificate, often the information is very condensed in those certificates, and you need to know how to format your translation so that it is also just one page. You can't have it spreading over 2 pages. It's got to look like the original. So if there's anything that's unclear about the accreditation process or the exam, you can contact Erika to help you, to guide you through that. Her details will be on the SARTI website. Linda, do you want me still to speak about charging? Have I run out of time? I'm not exactly sure. Shall I do that?
Please, if you please.
Okay, so charging for translation generally in South Africa because it's not a regulated profession, there is no specific rule for how you charge. So I, as a translator and an editor and a sworn translator, I have different rates for sworn translation and general translation and editing. Other translators will charge the same amount for all types of translation, but then they add an extra amount, a flat fee, for making the translation a sworn translation. What you do have to consider when you're doing sworn translation that's different is that there's a lot of communication that's involved with the client beforehand. Often the person who phones you doesn't really understand what sworn translation is. You have to explain to them the process that you need to see the original document, that you issue it as a hard copy, which will come up later. Often the client will bring the document to you. So there's a lot of extraneous time that's involved in the translation, not just the actual translating of the words. And you should factor that in. You should factor your time in that's involved if you need to deliver the document somewhere to be couriered to a client. So I can't really say what exactly you must charge. Different languages have different rates, but you really must factor in all the extra time that it takes as well.
Thank you very much, Bev. All right. Now, Hester, if we can move on to you. You were extensively involved in rewriting the sworn translation manual, as I mentioned before. Would you please explain to us what the main changes are, what it costs? Bev, you've already told us what the cost is, but where one can get it. Also, if you could also then just talk about how normal accreditation with SARTI differs from sworn accreditation, in case people don't understand the difference. And lastly, if you can tell us a bit more about how to prepare for your court appearance to be sworn in, and also what an apostille is about. Hester, did you hear me? It seems that we have a bit of a lagging there on your side. Hester, are you there?
I'm sorry, Linda, you're breaking up. I can't hear all that you're asking. I'm sorry, if you can just repeat that.
All right. So what I was saying is you were extensively involved in the rewriting of the sworn translation manual. So if you can just maybe talk about some of the main changes from the previous manual, and then where one can get the manual and so on. Then also if you can talk about how normal accreditation differs from sworn accreditation. And lastly, tell us a bit more about how to prepare for your court appearance to be sworn in, and what an apostille is about.
I'll do that. As far as the manual is concerned, the old manual is still valid. All the information that was contained in the old manual is still in the new manual. So basically what we needed to do was just a little bit of an update, add a few things that we felt that weren't in the previous manual, and then we added a lot of examples, which I think would be really helpful if you are working in the field. So you don't have to throw your old one out, but it would be a very good idea to get the new one. If you are a person that wants to get accredited, you have to get the new one, because there will be things there that you would not know if you have not worked in the field. It's stuff that you will only know once you've worked on it. So basically it is just an updated version, and we try to make it very user-friendly so that it's easy to find stuff if you don't know where you're going, especially when you're a new sworn translator. So hopefully it will be a great help. And then the second thing that I think Beverley has already basically stated the difference between your regular accreditation and your sworn translation accreditation. But I think what she hasn't said is the court proceedings. Once you've been accredited and you actually want to go to court, how do you go about? So there are two things. Firstly, you will be issued with a certificate. Apart from the certification, a certificate that you get of accreditation, you will also get a Rule 59.2 certificate, which is a document that you need to go and hand in at court. So then when you go to court, there are two ways of doing it. You can either go the advocate route, get yourself some counsel, which would be the easy route, which is the recommended route, because if you don't know how court works, it can be really daunting. So then you just contact either an advocate that you know who will do it for you free of charge. Otherwise, you'll have to pay somebody to do that. Or alternatively, if you if you have got guts, you can go and do it in person. Nothing stops you from doing that. And that is what I'm going to explain if you actually do it that route, what you need to do. So first of all, in the manual, there are the documents that you need, which is like I'm not going to talk about an index. An index is an index. Then you get the notice of set down, which is really, in this instance, we are ex parte because there's no other party. It's just you're not against somebody else. So the notice of set down is not really necessary in this instance, but we do send that form with. So because otherwise they will say there is no notice of set down, where is it? So just put it in there. They'll see that it's ex parte and they'll handle it accordingly. Then you've got the notice of motion, which is something, it's just a document that tells the court, what do I want from the court? In this instance, I want to become sworn and admitted in the court. So you put that in there. Then the next one is an affidavit. That is really to give your personal particulars. It tells who you are, what you want to do, that you have passed the SART exams, things like that. And then that has to be done in front of a commissioner of oath so that you tell the truth. Basically, it just says that. Then you'll add your SART certificate, the rule 59.2, and then there is a statement which is really the oath that you take in court, that you type out and you leave space for you to sign. So it's going to be read out to you in court from that document, and then you're going to sign it in front of the judge. Now, once you've got all those documents ready, you actually go to court, you go to the court building. You can go to the registrar and just make sure that there are no other requirements that have been changed, but these are, as we speak, these are the documents that you need. Then you go to the general office and you'll have to ask one of two things. If you've got a specific date in mind, say, for example, you've got an advocate and he's not going to go and do all these things for you, he's just going to appear on the day, and he's given you a date, then you go and find out from them when that role closes for that particular date. And it's normally you work with a month in advance, because things don't always happen all that fast at court. So you can't go today and say, I want to be sworn in tomorrow or whatever. So basically you'll go there, and if you don't have a date in mind, it doesn't matter. You ask them, when is the first available date, but give yourself and them some time. So give yourself 2-3 weeks time so that everything can go according to what they do at court. So, and then also at that general office, they will open a file for you and you'll get a case number. That case number is your registration number. You'll use it for the rest of your life. It's going to appear on all your documentation. It will appear on your stamps, your commissioner of oath stamps, everything. So that is a real important number to remember. So, just make a note of that, don't lose it. And then you go back, you go and complete your documents, because now you need to insert that case number on there. You need to insert the date and get them ready. And then you go and hand in 2 sets. The reason for handing in 2 sets, that very often in motion court, you have 2 judges instead of 1. So you don't want to just hand in a set of documents to the one judge and the other judge sits and he's got nothing to do. So you will prepare three sets. 1 you keep, because obviously you need to keep that, and then the other 2 will be handed in. So that file will then be sent through the court process, and you need to ask the general office when that file will be ready for collection. And on the date that it's ready for collection, you go and collect it and you take it to the motion court office. This has to be done at least 2 days before the date that you're supposed to appear in the motion court. If not, your name will not appear on that roll, and you actually won't be admitted that day. Then on the day, you go an hour early, more if you can, but an hour before the start of the day. So everybody's got to be there. You've got to find your court. You go and see where the motion roll is, where your court is, and have a look at the numbers, because you get sworn in at the same time as all the attorneys and anybody else. So you're just part of them. Have a look. Are you number 7, number 10 on the list or whatever? And then you go into court, and you go and you speak to the clerk. She normally sits there. You ask her, where do I go and stand? Where do I go and which microphone do I use? And a little bit about the procedure. And then take a seat next to an aisle, because you don't want to, when it's your turn, stand up and walk between the people and so on. So the aisle is easy. You go there and you've got to prepare a statement. You've got to tell the court, why are you there, who you are, why are you there, and that you've got all your documents available, and then you will basically, that's really all they need to know. Then they'll give you the oath, they'll read it to you, you'll sign it in front of the judge, and you're basically ready to go. Then you've just got to go and find out when you can get your certification, and That's normally about 10 days. Yeah, 10 days, 7 to 10 days, and then you get that from the registrar. And just one tip, when you pick up your sworn certificate from the High Court, your admission certificate, please check everything. Check that your name is spelled correctly, that your ID number, your address, everything. Mine was full of mistakes. So go and do that. Let them change it right there, because to go and change it afterwards is a problem. And that is basically, then you're ready, then you make your stamps and you start working as a sworn translator. The only other thing I need to want to quickly touch on, and I hope I'm not over my time, is the difference between what is an apostille and a certificate of authentication. It simply is a document that the registrar of the court issues, and they attach it to your sworn translation to say you are who you say you are. You have been admitted in this court, and the details of that. So it's really just a rubber stamp to say you are who you are. They're both the same. Some countries want an apostille, the other one wants a certificate of authentication, basically say the same thing. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Hester. Can I just ask people if you have any questions so far on what panelists have been talking about? You're welcome to start, posing your questions in the Q&A section, or if you're on Facebook, in the comment section. Okay. So Laurent, if I can ask you to tell us a bit more about the practicalities of working as a sworn translator, particularly in French. For instance, do you find that you have enough work? Where does your work come from? Do you have any tips for sworn translators in South Africa who work in foreign languages?
Well, hello. Thank you for that, Linda. Well, first of all, I got sworn in personally at the court without the help of an advocate. That was very daunting, indeed. I got lost in the corridors that morning. I arrived late, even though I came probably an hour earlier than expected. It was, I had to stand in front of this lady judge. There was a whole procedure. I had to use a very specific register terminology, and it was all very daunting indeed. So I do recommend the use of also an advocate or a lawyer, anyone. I was very lucky. I got sworn in 2000. I started doing a translation in 98, French-English, English-French, for which I got 2 SATI certificates and accreditations. I highly recommend SATI's accreditations, actually, because I myself went through a private accreditation system with first with another translator, and personally it wasn't satisfactory, and that's when I realized, okay, SATI is far more serious, and I will probably get better or more out of a SATI accreditation. Then went on to I've been practicing for since 2000 now. That's been 20 years of translations in both directions, English, French, French, English. My clients are mostly people from various institutions, agricultural institutions, academic institutions, cultural art institutions. I do a lot of mining work as well. The work comes mostly as far as the work that comes from the consulates and the embassies. That's mostly holidaymakers, people who always seek paperwork to be translated. A lot of driver's licenses and birth certificates. Those are mostly the documents I get to translate for the French holidaymakers, for immigrants, people who come and work here on contracts, that sort of thing. Other than that, I work as a sworn translator. I work on my own. When I do non-sworn translations, I work with other translators. I have a very small network of people I trust and who trust me. We have maybe a little team going. Other than that, I think I was asked also to talk about the fee structure. I like to, like I said the other day, I like to simplify my life, so I charge the same for sworn translations and for non-sworn translations. I have a different structure for whether it's clients from France or clients from South Africa. And whether I work towards French or towards English, because in French there are always more words, and based on that, and also based on the fact that a lot of clients nowadays want final quotes before you start the job so that they really know what they're going to pay for, although I prefer to charge in the target language, because then I know exactly how much I've been putting in terms of work. Then a combination of all these makes up that makes the final invoice. I'm one of those French translators who charge 120 Rand mostly per 100 words, and more or less maybe 150 Rands if it's clients from France, universities or that sort of institution. And if it's from French towards English, usually I would work on the basis of 120, and if it's from English to French, on the basis of 130 Rands per 100 words. So that's putting a very specific figure on things. And the practicalities, well, I sort of recently, I mean, I could have done that years ago, but recently I realized that having an international account was very helpful when you have clients from overseas, and they can only pay you in euro or whichever other currency. And it's really very practical to be able to manage your funds, your money that way, and then do transfers, all legally, of course, via the Reserve Bank. Everything is approved and it's very convenient. So that's where technology comes in, and that's really fantastic. Also, the one thing, the one tip I would, well, it's not really a tip, it's the one thing that I find has helped me keep my clients is to always do value added, to do more than expected. The one thing I have found often is that the source texts I'm given are not very complete. They haven't really been worked through or edited properly. So that's something I do for free all the time for the client's benefit. That's value added as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's about it, unless you have more specific questions to ask me.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Okay, we have a question. Bev, can I ask you to answer this for us, please? So Faye asked whether it's worth going for the general translation accreditation if we seek and obtain the sworn translation accreditation. So in other words, is it worth doing both?
So what I would say is I wouldn't suggest that if you want to become sworn, it's not necessary to try and become accredited in general translation and then later try the sworn translation exam. They are two quite different exams. So I became accredited for general translation many years before I did the sworn translation exam, and that's why I have both. If you are really just interested in being a sworn translator, then you just do the sworn translation exam. You then considered accredited in any case. So as I understand it, if somebody phones the SARTI office and asks for an accredited translator, you know, that's sort of an umbrella term for all accredited translators. So it isn't necessary to do both of them. It's a nice challenge, and there's nothing wrong with doing both. But if sworn translation is your ultimate goal, then just go straight for that.
Thanks so much. All right, then Greta asks, Laurent, if I can address this question to you, please. She asks, would the panelists recommend that freelance language practitioners add sworn translation to their arsenal of skills to increase their earning ability? So in other words, do you feel that you were, over the years, were able to earn more because you are a sworn translator, and perhaps also your workflow, how much of your workflow consists of sworn translation as opposed to general translation?
Mm. Well, the answer is obviously yes, definitely. I mean, it's better to be to have both skills. And also sworn translation. I mean, with thanks to sworn translation, you often have more work than standard or non-sworn translation, because in my case, being French, with the French community being a very important holiday-making community, let's put it that way, in South Africa, then that means that I do get a lot of French people contacting me for that very purpose of sworn documentation. So that's definitely a plus. And other than that, I know that there was this general thing many years ago in South Africa where we said, you know, we don't really specialize in South Africa as far as translators are concerned, because they never used to be really that much work for everybody. So we used to take on anything really, which is what I've been doing all these years. But there are areas which I like to specialize in, which is agriculture and mining and anything legal really. And those areas I've sort of specialized in because I like those areas, those subjects, but also because that's where a lot of work came in, and it's just then people get to know you, your name, your work, and then you end up with the same kind of work after that. So if you can diversify, it's always better. I remember there was a colleague from Pretoria. She runs a translation company, and she had decided then to specialize in pharmaceuticals or anything to do with pharmaceuticals. So that was her field, her thing, and which is fantastic. So she gets a lot of work just for that, which is really, really great, because she supplies service, much needed service in that field. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Laurent. Hester, if I may ask you to answer Julia's question. She wants to know, are there any specific English dictionaries relevant to the legal field that you would recommend?
Hi, yes, absolutely. You cannot work without the trilingual English, Afrikaans, Latin dictionary. It's a legal dictionary that's got your legal words and phrases. It's got the Latin and its explanation, as well as the Afrikaans going to the English. Without that, I don't think you'll be very successful, because your ordinary dictionaries will not be able to help you. So any legal dictionary, but that is one that's really important to have. You cannot work as a sworn translator without that. I think it's Himstra, if I remember correctly. I'm not at home now, so I can't check it now.
Himstra and Garnon. Okay, thanks, Hester. Right, Bev, can I ask you to answer Eddie's question? I was going to ask you whether you can add to the dictionaries, maybe, first of all. Is there any other?
So working from Afrikaans into English, I agree with Hester. That's your Bible, if you want to call it that. I mean, Laurent might have, I'm not sure if Julia, what languages she works between. So there might be, I'm not sure if she's working in a foreign language, and Laurent might have a French equivalent to that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Shall I say something? Yes, I have. I use dictionaries all the time. A lot of online dictionaries. I use the what's called the IATE. IATE. It's this terminological database, which is huge, which is for all the European languages. So I use that a lot, between French and English, of course, because it's always up to date with the latest terminology in whatever field. And I have my own dictionaries, which I've bought and downloaded over the years, very practical ones. So absolutely, yes, they're always the same dictionaries. And I used to use published publications, hard copies, which I still use from time to time, because they have maybe some old terms that we don't find anywhere else, and they just are explained better maybe. But yeah, a lot of dictionaries all the time, online dictionaries, and very practical, very useful.
Thanks so much, Laurent. All right. then Eddie wants to know who are we going to ask? Okay, Eddie's question is for you, if you don't mind, Bev. Is there a standard SARTI procedure that regulates the fees for translation? That is either target text language based, or should it be source or start text language based? I'm not sure if it's Eddie or Edwin.
Right, I should probably just disclaimer, I don't actually work for SARTI. So, but they are not allowed to regulate fees. So they will give advice, but they can't tell you how to charge. I think a lot of us do charge by target text, number of words in the target text, because as Laurent said, it's easier to, once you've completed the translation, that is the exact number of words that you've written down, and that's what you charge by. But it also does depend on which language. In German, I believe they had a system of charging by line. So it really is quite language dependent, I think. So SARTI wouldn't have a standard procedure. I see Laurent has probably something more useful than me to say about that.
Well, also there's a lot of I think a lot of people have been charging also for when there's machine translation involved. Then obviously one is not going to do per word or per 100 words. One is going to do whole pages, a whole document at a time. They're charging per for a whole page, maybe a whole document, as I say, because the machine translation is supposed to make things faster, the work faster, the workflow is faster, the translation is faster. So that sort of thing. I don't do that. I've never. I don't use aids. Software computer-aided translation, so I can't really say much about that. I wanted to say something about the, yes, often in sworn translation specifically, many of the documents you have to work with are either, if they are originals handed over personally by hand, they are not, they don't have a word count, so you would have to do the word count manually yourself beforehand. That's why it's better to charge in, or to invoice in the target language, because it's only once you've done the work, then you know exactly how many words you've translated, and that's very practical. There we are.
Thanks so much, Laurent. I might just add there that it is actually illegal for any price fixing to be done by any organization in South Africa. We are an open, free capitalist market, so neither SARTI nor any other organization may fix prices, so to speak. All right, then I just want to, thanks Johan. Johan Blau has reminded us that the sworn translation manual is a very handy source to have, so as to orientate one towards the kind of accuracy required in more official or formal translations, even if not sworn, as part of one's work, if one is employed by a company, a higher education institution, etc. Thanks so much, Johan, for that. All right, and then we have on Facebook, we have Letitia asking, or first of all, Hester saying that I had the lovely Hester as my mentor when I was admitted as sworn translator in 2016, and wouldn't have been able to do it without her. But I'm of the opinion that becoming a sworn translator is a little bit of a catch-22, because you can't really get the practice on the types of documents because you're not sworn in the first place. So is SARTI planning some kind of mentorship program in future to assist would-be sworn translators? Hester, are you perhaps aware of anything of this sort? But just hang on a moment. Oh, sorry. Yes, I see Teresa has answered that. Yes, so Letitia, yes, we are working on mentorship at the moment. Yes, I was aware that we were working on mentorship. I just wasn't sure about the sworn translation. So Teresa has confirmed that we will let you know shortly what we have in mind. All right, and then Eddie again. I think though dictionaries are important, they are always out of context. Would you agree with me that the context is primary than the dictionary itself? Oh, Eddie and Edwin, it's the same person. All right. I hear what you're saying, Eddie. I think that is true for any kind of translation, really. So you would always have to apply your background knowledge, and especially, for instance, if you do legal translations, you would need some sort of legal background. You need to, for instance, I studied law. If you haven't studied law, then you would need to at least do some sort of studying in the legal field, to my mind, to really understand legal texts. I would not advise a person who has no legal background at all to even try to do legal translations. That's a personal opinion. I might be wrong, but especially when it comes to understanding the context and so on. And sometimes you're confronted with an entire page that consists of one sentence, so you really need to, keep all your tools together and really understand what is going on. So I would certainly recommend some sort of legal background. Then for additional research, you can get hold of some statutes online. And obviously that is something that as a, Hester, I'm coming to now, thanks. That is something that you obviously need to do extensively, is research. For any kind of, in most legal translations, you will find that you need to do a little bit of research to understand certain complex concepts, or maybe just a specific act that's referred to, or that kind of thing. Hester, you wanted?
What I'd like to say there is, even as an experienced sworn translator, what Eddie has said there about the dictionaries is true. You often, you look at a dictionary, you're looking for a word, you look for the translation of the word in that particular context, which is not always clear. What is a very useful source is your internet. If you go and you search, say, for example, a lease agreement, many of them will pop up. And if you go to the images, where they actually have examples of that, you can actually search there and search and search it. But basically, everything that you do, you will save, because you are going to need it again. So eventually you will become your own best dictionary, your own work. You'll have to save it. And that is the only way that you can learn and learn and learn. And if you've got CAT tools where you can save it, some people do that. Otherwise, like Laurent has earlier said, we always deal with the straightforward hard copy and not necessarily an electronic copy. But if you OCR the document, you can get to a Word copy. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But basically, your internet is their valuable source to look at other documents of the same kind.
Right. Thank you so much. Okay, then I just want to read a comment by Alison Wright. Like Laurent Chauvet, I too highly recommend SARTI's translation accreditation exams. The standard is justifiably high because standards are high in the real world of work. Thanks for that, Alison. All right, then Simpino asks, kindly, Bev, if you wouldn't mind answering this one, kindly advise me on the SARTI general translation accreditation process, other than the one for sworn translation, which was clearly explained.
Yes, thanks. So really the process is exactly the same, other than for general translation, you don't need to buy the sworn translation manual. But as I said, the webinar on accreditation is on the SARTI website, www.translators.org.za. It was on the 29th of July, and that will explain that quite clearly for you. And also you can email Erika, exams@translators.org.za, and she will answer any questions that you have about general accreditation.
Thanks, Bev. I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether you actually mentioned it now, but people can go to the webinar on accreditation of a few weeks ago. Did I miss that? I'm not sure. Okay, on the SARTI website. Okay. Okay, now can I just ask each panelist to make a short closing comment that kind of sums up what you've said before. So if we can start with you, Bev.
Okay, so what hasn't been covered, which actually the SARTI office asked us just to remind everybody, is that a general translator, someone who is not a sworn translator, cannot do a translation and then send it to a sworn translator and ask them to certify it. It's not illegal, but most sworn translators will not actually do that. They will say to you, I will just do the translation again myself and certify it myself, because the person who signs the sworn translation is the one who is responsible for whatever happens after that. So if you are a normal general translator, please don't ask a sworn translator to stamp your translation. It's not actually ethical. And then the last thing I want to say is that anyone who's interested in becoming accredited, please do it. It's a great challenge. It's not designed to be terrifying. It's not meant to trick you. And the more accredited translators there are, the better it is for the profession. People become more aware of what we do and that we actually do have high standards, and there's less chance of other people doing work that's substandard. So please do try the test. Everything is anonymous, so nobody will know that you've done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hester?
I can just say that I would really recommend people, if you've got the capability of becoming a sworn translator, to do that. It really is interesting work. You learn every single day. There is never a moment that you can say, I know it all, because you never know it all. But what is nice about it is that you meet people. People have to come to you physically to bring their documents to you. It seldom is via email. They can send it to you via email, but when they collect the translation, they actually come to you. And you won't believe the people that you meet through that. It's really wonderful. So I'll recommend it. Thank you.
Thanks. Laurent? Laurent, just unmute your speaker.
Yes, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. For me, I would stress really, if you want to become a sworn translator, do it via SATI, really. It's very serious. Like Bev said, very high standards, and it's very important. The one thing I wanted to quickly say earlier on about what Hester was talking about dictionaries. I have been building my own dictionary for the past 20 years, and I've reached now probably about 366 pages of information in all fields. And basically, that's my big tip for today, whether in sworn translation or in any other translation, is keep track of everything you do. Always put combinations of words, what's called collocations, to nicely translated, put them in a table form somewhere, keep that, and accumulate that knowledge. And it's very, very useful. So be your own dictionary as well. And to finish, internet, definitely. I always make sure I find at least 2 or 3 pieces of information that confirm a translation, something maybe exotic or something I couldn't find in my normal dictionaries. And if I can find 2 or 3 instances of that proven fair and square on the internet, not from Canada, but usually from a French website or .fr, then I'm happy and I use that as my final translated expression. And thank you for having me on the panel today.
Thank you so much to all the panelists and the audience as well. I just want to remind you of our next webinar. So that'll be on Wednesday, the 23rd of September, the same time, same place. It's on interpreting technology, and it'll take the form of a presentation with slides of about 40 minutes with 20 minutes for questions. The presenter is Elizabeth Daisel, a permanent interpreter at National Parliament. She's currently conducting PhD research at Stellenbosch University on the topic of interpreting technology. Up until recently, the focus was mainly on the development of translation technology such as CAT tools and so on. But a great deal of time, effort, and attention, as well as money, now go into technologies to be used by simultaneous interpreters in the booth, but also for consecutive interpreting and remote interpreting. Elizabeth will give an overview of all the latest technological advances in this field, so our members who are interpreters should definitely save the date. And then I just want to thank you all once again. You've posed some very interesting questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get around to all of them, but see you then next time. Thank you very much.